What is going on, Brooklyn Nets fans? Hello, everyone, and welcome back here into another edition of the Brooklyn Boys Show. Make sure you smash that like button and hit subscribe on your way into the building. It's completely free, and it helps us grow significantly right here on the show. Through all your questions, comments, thoughts in the chat. We're going to get to those. Appreciate all of your support. As always, right here on this late Monday morning, July 21st, 2025. Today we are joined by a very special guest right here on the show, the great Fred Katz, joining myself, Connor Long, right here on this beautiful Monday morning. Fred, thank you so much for sparing some time for us, my friend. How you been?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, man. I appreciate it. I love that you're doing this show, and I'm really happy to be here.
I appreciate the kind words. And like I said, I am super happy that you are able to be here. Obviously, super busy. Summer League just wrapped up. The Chris Paul news breaking right before the show starts. So at least maybe, when restricted free agency is wrapped up, which is maybe over the next, few weeks or so, hopefully, as a team that is kind of in the middle of that with Cam Thomas remaining on the restricted free agent market. Maybe there's some time to, relax, maybe a bit of a dead period in the NBA, with there are a lot of in the NFL. But I mentioned his name right there, Cam Thomas. I'd be remiss if I didn't start with the Big 24. He remains a restricted free agent after the offseason kicked off and everyone expected him to be back in Brooklyn as move numero uno. Still a restricted free agent. Among others, Josh Giddey, Jonathan Kuminga, Quentin Grimes, all three of those names still remain restricted free agents as well. Fred, how far apart truly are the Nets and Cam Thomas in these contractual negotiations?
I think there is certainly a divide. I think that's the case with kind of all the four restricted guys that you just named. Right now, we're kind of at a point where the whole league does not have the assets, does not have the exceptions, does not have the cap space to be able to go out and make offers to these guys. So it becomes extremely difficult for someone like Cam Thomas, like Jonathan Kuminga, like Quentin Grimes, like Josh Giddey, to be able to get an offer from somebody else that they can actually leverage into money from their own team. And that's kind of the standstill they're in. Now, in situations of the past, we've seen restricted free agents kind of drag along because it's harder to get paid in restricted free agency than it is non-restricted free agency. And we've seen restricted free agent situations kind of drag along. And sometimes those guys still end up getting paid by their own teams because there's just a sort of thing of like, this guy is a $20 million player and thus we're going to pay him $20 million. There's also a feeling of, well, you don't want to severely underpay your own employees because then that's going to foster a sort of resentment and it's not going to foster the kind of culture that you want as an organization. So you kind of want to pay them the least amount that you could reasonably pay a guy without actually making them upset. And there's sort of that reality that teams end up falling onto also. I do think the Nets and Cam Thomas are not necessarily close. I don't know if those suitors are out there for him. I don't really know where those suitors would come from. I haven't heard any talk of a sign and trade or anything like that. I know the Warriors with Kuminga have looked for sign and trades, and I don't think they've really gotten any traction there. I think it's a really hard financial environment right now for restricted free agents, especially with somebody who's like got a very specific game and a very specific sort of basketball fit like Cam Thomas.
You mentioned his very specific play style. NBA analyst Zach Lowe went as far last week calling him an empty calories ball hog, which Cam Thomas then responded to. I think we all know Cam Thomas's skill set, Fred. He could do one thing, and that's to score. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's still a valuable asset as potentially a sixth man on a championship winning team. Every championship caliber team needs a guy who could just go and get points whenever he needs. I think the biggest thing that separates him from a Donovan Mitchell, for example. Donovan Mitchell, his defense kind of evens out. Is Donovan Mitchell a stingy defender? Is he one of the best defensive guards in the league? Absolutely not. He brings the same level of scoring, if not more, than Cam Thomas does, and his defense is a little more stable. How do you view Cam Thomas's skill set? How is it perceived around the league? And do you think an empty calories ball hog is a little bit disrespectful to the LSU product?
I think what Zach said is probably closer to what his reputation in the league is than Cam Thomas would want. I think people probably mostly look at him as a guy of like, if he's going to be successful, then it's going to be in like an instant offense off the bench kind of role where he's just scoring a bunch of points off the bench, and he's able to score extremely well off the bench. And that's about it. I will say, like, he is a heck of a scorer. The guy can score like crazy, but you kind of have to pick your spots. And the other part of it is there are a lot of guys in the league who are great scorers. The question isn't, are you a great scorer? The question is the offense that you are on elite when you are acting as a great scorer? And if the answer is no, then maybe that's not your idealized role within the team. You know, you can look at a lot of guys in the league who are really, really good for themselves with the ball in their hands, but it's not necessarily the best for their team if the ball is always in their hands. I do think Cam Thomas can get better as an off-ball guy. I do think Cam Thomas can obviously get better as kind of a passer within the offense, and can get better as a defender. And I do think the reputation in the league is like, well, if you're going to pay just for scoring, then you don't have to pay that much. Like, let's look at the guards who are just scorers right now. Let's look at them. Tim Hardaway Jr. just got a minimum. Tim Hardaway Jr.
Sexton got traded for pretty much nothing.
For nothing. Colin Sexton got traded for nothing. Tim Hardaway Jr. had a good year last year. Got signed for a minimum. Norman Powell went to the Heat for. They gave up two vets who aren't nearly as good as Norman Powell. They gave up Kevin Love and they gave up Kyle Anderson. And that was what they gave up for Norman Powell. And Norman Powell averaged a very efficient 22 a game last year. You look at what scoring guards, I mean, even this isn't just a this year thing. Last year, Malik Beasley got $6 million. Like, this is the market for guys who are just scoring guards, and that's what they do, is low. And when you are kind of the most extreme version of that type, it's going to be difficult for you to get something. So I could see a million different possibilities with Cam Thomas. I could see him saying, you know what, this is still a lot of money in the real world. Let me re-up on a longer term deal and I'll get some security. I could see him saying, you know what, screw it, I'm taking the qualifying offer and I'm betting on myself next year.
That's crazy.
I could see him signing kind of a 2-year deal, and you know, that's like cheap in the short term, and then hitting the market in 2 years. I shouldn't say that I'm not predicting him to take the qualifying offer, but like,
it's under $6 million. Yeah.
If the offers aren't good, he can always take it. Hit unrestricted free agency the next year.
Yeah, and then like a follow-up for me here with what you said about Cam Thomas, would you consider a guy like Darius Garland, for example, who isn't getting you 25, isn't getting you 23 points per game, but maybe he's giving you 13 to 15, and then he's also giving you 6-7 assists a night. You think his value is much more significant around the league compared to a Cam Thomas?
Darius Garland?
Yeah.
Oh, without a doubt.
Okay.
Not even close, because Garland is playing within the offense. Like, Cleveland last year had the second most efficient offense in modern NBA history. Scored about close to 122 points per 100 possessions last year, which is an insane number. And Donovan Mitchell gets a lot of the credit for being the star in Cleveland. And he is. And if you ask me, who do I think is the best player on the Cleveland team, I'd probably say Donovan Mitchell. That being said, Darius Garland last year ran more pick and rolls per 100 possessions than Donovan Mitchell did. He ran about as many isolations per 100 possessions as Donovan Mitchell did. He was their leading facilitator. Him getting to the paint and being able to, like, he's so good at jump passes. Him getting to the paint, Garland, and being able to kick to corner 3-point shooters and standstill jump shooters was a huge part of their offense, and a huge reason why, you know, they were an offense that didn't necessarily just hoist up a ton of threes, but they were really good at the threes they took. They were first in the league in percentage, and it was a huge reason why they were able to create just as many good looks as they were able to create. Garland, his touches were more than anybody else in that Cleveland offense. His time with the ball was more than anybody else in that Cleveland offense. That offense was historically awesome during the regular season, and Darius Garland was the guy who ran it based on eye test based on the metrics. And so much of this stuff comes down to like not necessarily just what are you doing in a vacuum, but what are you doing within the context of the team? And is it leading to actually good team-wide stuff? And what you're seeing from Darius Garland is like, yeah, he's scoring at a highly efficient level. He's shooting 40 from 3. He's shooting over 50 from 2s. And he is doing it in a way, number one, where he's facilitating, because he had a really good passing season last year, the best of his career.
I think he averaged like 7 assists a game.
Yeah, and number two, where the team is, it's leading to legitimate success. The team has the most efficient offense in the league, and I thought Garland was much better defensively during the regular season last year too. And we saw the effects of the offense, of what happens when Garland gets hurt in the playoffs. And we see what happens to the offense when Garland gets hurt in the playoffs. It loses its rhythm, it loses its effectiveness, and they end up getting trounced by Indiana in the second round. So yeah, I mean, I think Garland is somebody with a much higher value in the league than Cam Thomas.
Now, Fred, obviously the Nets are in a rebuilding phase. They've kind of shown that they're going to take their time. They're not going to rush anything in this rebuild. What is Cam Thomas's true role on a championship-winning team? Do you think he could be a starting shooting guard? Do you view him more as a Lou Williams guy, a sixth man coming off the bench who can give you 15, 17 a night on solid shooting splits from downtown? How do you view Cam Thomas's role? What role would he play on a championship caliber team?
Yeah, I think if it's anything, it's got to be the off the bench instant offense guy who, like, on some nights can come in and when he's really hot, just let him roll. And on other nights, if he's not really hot, or if he's kind of scoring in spite of the team, then maybe he plays 16 minutes. I think that's probably the way he's viewed right now, and I think that's probably the best path for him at this point. I'm not writing him off as he's got to be that guy. I'm not writing it off as he will definitely be that guy. He's still young. He's still developing. And for all we know, he works like crazy on his vision and his passing and his decision-making and his defense. And we can see him as a starting shooting guard moving forward. But if we're talking about like on a championship team, I mean, if he were in a high-level playoff series, he would get put in pick and rolls every single possession. And it would be a real problem for his team if he were like closing a game in a high-level playoff series. And the shots that he takes, if he were taking them in a high-level playoff series against elite defenders, that would be a problem for an offense for sure. So you need to be able to be a quicker and more effective decision maker if you're going to be in like a starting lineup on a championship team. And I don't think that's part of his game right now. I don't really like putting guys in boxes and saying that it never can be. But if we're evaluating him on the player that he is today, or at least that he was on the last day of the regular season, that's where I'd have him.
I want to move over to one of the other prominent restricted free agents who still remains available, that being Jonathan Kuminga, someone the Nets have been linked to as a potential fit. Fred, based on what you're hearing, do the Nets have any level of interest in potentially adding Jonathan Kuminga this offseason in the weekend?
I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that at all. I mean, there's been a little bit of like Kuminga Kings talk, which I don't really think went anywhere. I haven't really heard any legitimate traction on Kuminga. And if I had to bet, I would bet right now that Kuminga ends up back in Golden State. And I think it's possible they trade him in the middle of the season. Wow. But there are it's very complicated to get Kuminga somewhere else because do you know base year compensation, the most complicated thing in the collective bargaining agreement, which basically says
the APRA, everything is so nuanced in this new CBA, and it's like seeing what teams now are. The smallest things can make you hard capped at the second apron compared to having all the flexibility in the world. Like trading for cash in a trade could make you capped at the second apron and not be able to make any more moves. But yes, it's insane.
And so base year compensation, which has actually been around for a long time, it's not just this CBA. Base year compensation is kind of like an old school rule that still exists. But base year compensation says basically if a player is getting a raise, if a free agent is getting a raise of more than 20%, and you want to sign and trade that player, then that player's outgoing salary from the team that he's getting signed and traded from is going to be a different number than his incoming salary to the team he's getting signed and traded to. And because of that, it makes matching up the salaries so that you can actually salary match because you have to comply for the rules of trades. It makes matching up salaries unbelievably difficult in order to do that. So the ways that you can do that is you can add a bunch of other salary, which isn't going to happen, to throw off the numbers, but that's not going to happen because the Warriors are not just going to like trade Jimmy Butler in order to make a Jonathan Kuminga sign and trade work. You can also find a third team and hope that they will add salary on your behalf. But now with the aprons and everything else, that becomes increasingly difficult. It's not impossible to sign and trade somebody with base year compensation. We mentioned Colin Sexton earlier this pod. That's how Colin Sexton ended up in Utah. Colin Sexton was with Cleveland, and then he got signed and traded to Utah as part of the Donovan Mitchell deal. And the reason that ended up working is because there was a lot of other salary involved. They were including Lauri Markkanen and other guys, and that was how that trade went down. But it is very difficult mathematically to figure that kind of stuff out. And so a sign and trade with Kuminga becomes very difficult very quickly. And I do think the most likely scenario for all four of these guys is they end up back with their same teams. I really do. I think that's most likely. That's what I would bet on for every one of these guys. I sign and trades are going to be tough for them because of base year compensation with all of them. And there's just not necessarily the space in the room out there for other teams to make them offers.
Putting on your analyst hat, Fred, what do you think would make more sense for Brooklyn? Pay Cam Thomas $15, $20 million a year, we'll say on a 3 or 4 year deal, or give Jonathan Kuminga $15 to $20 million a year on a 3 to 4 year deal? What would make more sense for Brooklyn?
I think Cam Thomas probably extend the asset and Kuminga being able to get him for that price. You're going to have to give stuff up. And I don't think Brooklyn is in a position to be giving stuff up right now. Like that team isn't competitive enough to where like that team's not going to sniff the play-in tournament next year, whether they have Jonathan Kuminga or don't have Jonathan Kuminga. So I would not be in a position to where like, all right, well now I got it. Cause if you give Kuminga $15 million a year, that means you're going to have to make it a sign and trade and you're going to have to give the Warriors something. And I wouldn't want to give something up. I would rather just kind of extend the asset. I do think if I'm Brooklyn, I would rather re-sign Cam Thomas than lose Cam Thomas for nothing because you're at least stringing along the asset and you're keeping that guy in house. And that way, you know, if Cam Thomas does develop, then you have something. And if he doesn't develop, then it's fine. Then the contract expires and he goes whenever he goes, or he becomes an expiring contract in a couple of years and you can move him then as just expiring money. But I think you want to keep your young guys in-house for that exact reason, just in case, especially when you're a rebuilding team. And I would not want to give up stuff for Kuminga if I'm Brooklyn. If I'm another team, maybe, but not a team that's in the position that Brooklyn is in, where they have a lot of really young players and, you know, they're coming off a year where they weren't competitive and they're not really going to be competitive in the Eastern Conference again. And I think I would just veer away from anything that has me giving stuff up. I want all my future stuff. They are loaded with picks, and I would want to stay as loaded with picks as I possibly can.
It's such a tough question for me, Fred, because when you look at this current team right now, I think Cam Thomas is a better fit as that true bucket getter, as that true scorer, the guy who can, you know, be your shooting guard alongside who you hope is your facilitator, that being Yegor Dioman, you took with the number 8 overall pick in this year's NBA draft. But when you look at a championship winning team, I think Kuminga fits the bill of a championship caliber player more than Cam Thomas just because of the all-around impact, because of his athleticism, his ability to get you, 7 rebounds a game, give you potentially 15, 20 points when he hits his ceiling. But that's the biggest thing for Jonathan Kuminga, hitting his ceiling. We haven't truly seen Jonathan Kuminga's ceiling, in my opinion. He hasn't been able to get, 20 and 8 a night, which I think he can do. And, the numbers that he put up last year, the numbers that he's put up his whole career, in my opinion, aren't worth, 4 years, $80 million, 4 years, $100 million. The number you want to look, when you look at Kuminga, you're paying a guy based on what he can be. Same goes for Cam Thomas, but Cam Thomas, at least he showed you a glimmer of that. I don't think we've really seen what Kuminga's ceiling looks like. It's kind of all just a prediction here. We do have a question in the chat. Down Under Dunker says, ask Fred if he thinks the Nets should sign and trade Cam Thomas, maybe in a package deal, or should we just let him walk?
Depends on what you're getting back. I don't know if there's a sign and trade out there for Cam Thomas, to be honest. I don't know. I don't know if that's there. Whenever somebody asks me, do you think somebody should be traded? My answer is always, all right, well, what's coming back? It all depends on what's coming back. If you're signing and trading him just to get him out of town, then I'd rather just give him a team-friendly contract and bring him back and see what happens. Or even have him pick up the qualifying offer and see if he balls out and see what happens. If you're signing and trading him for something, if you're signing him and trading him for bad money, then maybe you sign and trade him for bad money and you take on an asset. Sure, I guess that could work. If you're signing and trading him for a decent player who you think has more value, then sure. But if that's the case, then why is the other team doing that? If you're signing and trading him to bring back any sort of draft pick, I think that could be reasonable. But number one, with signing and trading Cam Thomas, you run into the same problem I was just talking about with Kuminga, with base year compensation, where the math becomes very difficult. And secondly, I don't think teams are trying to give up assets for Cam Thomas. I don't. I think if that were the case, then we would have seen teams give up assets for Cam Thomas.
You can just pay him more money than Brooklyn will. Brooklyn has shown they're not in love with Cam Thomas. I mean, this is truly since he was drafted. They only really selected him because he fell till, the 27th overall pick in that draft. And he's a guy who Brooklyn really hasn't felt confident, to be completely honest, in playing significant minutes a night. I think Brooklyn's going as high as maybe $13, $15 million a year. I think teams would be better off paying him, 16, 17 in free agency, for example, outbidding Brooklyn and landing Cam Thomas compared to trying to land a side and trade. I don't think Cam Thomas is traded under any circumstance. I'm still holding out the belief that Cam Thomas will be back in Brooklyn this year, because I just don't look at any other team in the league and tab them immediately as a suitor for Cam Thomas, someone who'd be interested in Cam Thomas. So I'm still holding out hope, and I do ultimately believe that he will be back in Brooklyn this season. Someone who Brooklyn did trade for earlier this offseason as a part of the Kristaps Porzingis trade one night ahead of the NBA draft was Terrence Mann. And I think this is a player that a lot of Brooklyn Nets fans forget about. Someone who can give you solid rotational minutes off the bench if need be for a team that might look to tank this year. He can be a solid tank piece for you, Fred. How does he fit in with Brooklyn? Have you heard any talks of maybe Brooklyn trying to move off of him? How does he fit in on a team that has a ton of small forwards?
Well, I think the number one reason Brooklyn took him on was to be able to absorb the pick for taking on the contract. Yeah. Atlanta, he's got 3 years left on his deal. I want to say it's about $48 million, $47 million, and 3 years left on his contract. And Atlanta was really trying to get off of that. And so Atlanta simultaneously, first the Clippers were trying to get off of that. So Atlanta acquires him at the deadline this past year as a swap for Bogdanovich, where those two teams were basically like, all right, Bogdanovich is having a down year and Terrence Mann's having a down year. Let's swap one guy for the other. Those 15 to 27, $28 million salaries in this current economic environment in the NBA are the ones that really hurt your teams if you're not getting the proper production out of those guys. And I think that's how the Clippers looked at Terrence Mann, and that's kind of how Atlanta looked at Terrence Mann and trying to move him again because he had gotten that large extension from LA. in trying to move him again as part of the Porzingis trade. I think Brooklyn did that first and foremost to be able to get the draft pick along with Man and reload. And I liked that move for them. That was a good move. And now you kind of also have the opportunity to recoup Terrence Mann's value. You can say, all right, this guy is going to do okay, and probably not going to trade him this year because he's got too many years left, and teams are worried about guys with that many years left on their deal at that number. But in a year or two, okay, Terrence Mann, he guards and he can hit a corner three, and he's shown he can be successful in winning environments, and he makes the right decision, and he's a smart player and he plays hard. Okay, great. Yeah, we can bring in Terrence Mann for a year and a half and have him kind of add to the core because we need an extra wing. I could see a team kind of trading for him in that scenario. I think what you're probably not going to see from Terrence Mann is him getting overextended. I don't think you're going to see, okay, well, it's a tanking team and Terrence Mann's a vet, so now all of a sudden he's going to have the ball in his hands more, or he's going to average 16 points a game. I think he's the exact kind of guy who they're still going to play as a role player. And, Jordi Fernandez is all about fast offense, quick moving offense. I think that could be a good fit for him. I liked that move for them, but I liked that move for them more as kind of a smart asset play with the opportunity to maybe spin off Man into something else if things go right, as opposed to like, oh, this is going to make a huge difference for their team this year.
The Nets Press podcast comes in. Shout out, Dylan. Appreciate you tuning in. He says, do you think Brooklyn will make another move? 18 players currently on the roster, and Nick Claxton rumors have died out. If another move is to be made, what do you expect will happen?
I think the league is kind of done with the big moves right now. I think the Dame signing in Portland, I think, was kind of the last really big move that we're going to see, unless something absolutely wild happens with Giannis or something absolutely wild happens with LeBron, which I don't think we're seeing. I think this is kind of the point where we're getting a little quiet. Like, there's still some vet minimum guys who could be helpful. A Malcolm Brogdon. There are a couple of, maybe we see a couple of trades and that kind of stuff. And if there are trades, maybe the Nets try to get in there as a third team. And maybe the Nets try to get in there as a third team to take on salary and facilitate salary. And that's the kind of move that they should be making. And if they were going to make one, I think that would be it. I mean, obviously we talked about Cam Thomas and just the possibility of re-signing him. But in terms of like big earth-shattering moves, no, I don't see anything massive happening with Brooklyn. I think this is probably about what we're going to see, plus maybe Cam Thomas. And then we see them move into next season with kind of, Michael Porter Jr. and Terrence Mann and a bunch of young guys. And we see how that roster goes. I'm really curious to see how Jordi Fernandez organizes this roster, because it's very different than the one that was coming into last year. And I thought he did a great job last year. I thought that team played hard, played fast, played over its head, made great decisions all year for a young team, and for a team that shouldn't have had a lot of structure, but played as if they did have a lot of structure. I really honestly loved the coaching job that he did last year. I'm really curious to see how they come out, just stylistically, how they come out playing this year.
One more question here before we wrap. Dylan says, what is your expectation for Michael Porter Jr.? And do you feel there is room for him to reach another level in Brooklyn? Obviously, MPJ spoke on his YouTube channel after he was traded to Brooklyn, said he pretty much think he plateaued in Denver, which I think is a fair point to make. I think MPJ was a probably fourth option behind Aaron Gordon on that championship team, but easily could have been the third best player on that roster, a championship caliber player. How do you think, Fred, he's able to fit in, and is he really able to hit that next level?
I think he probably just kind of is what he is at this point. Mm-hmm. We haven't seen, 3 years ago, I would have said maybe there's an off the dribble game that's going to come. Maybe there's more of a little bit of a pick and roll game, a little bit of an isolation game that we're going to be able to see him create for himself in a greater way, because that was kind of his game coming into the league. And on top of that, he's so fluid at times that you're like, damn. And I think he has gotten better defensively. He's not a great defender by any means, but he's a much better defender than he was when he came into the league. I struggle to see a guy leave Nikola Jokic and think that guy's going to get better. because what tends to happen is the exact opposite. Michael Porter Jr., Kentavious Caldwell Pope leaves Denver, and all of a sudden he's a 33% shooter in Orlando. That's the stuff that tends to happen. Somebody goes to Denver, and all of a sudden they're just draining threes because Jokic is, the ultimate creator, and you get the Jokic bump. I struggle to see Porter Jr. being significantly better after leaving that environment, which was so great for him as an excellent spot up shooter. And he is an excellent shooter. He is a dynamic shooter. He is an incredible 3-point shooter. I think he is going to be good for Brooklyn. And I think he'll probably score in higher volume because the opportunities are going to be there, and someone's got to take the shots and someone's got to make the shots. And I think he's probably going to get a ton of opportunities to shoot the ball, probably average a lot of points. But in terms of the quality of player that he is, and to be clear, he's a good player. In terms of the quality of player that he is, I do feel like we haven't seen anything to suggest that he's going to take it to another level, or we haven't really seen flashes of oh, you know what? He can do that, but he just wasn't able to do it or wasn't allowed to do it in Denver. We haven't quite seen that. So I think he probably is about what he is right now, which is a good player who's going to hit a ton of threes. Who's probably going to take a ton of threes. Maybe he'll average just 9 threes a game
last year.
Right. I mean, and he's around that every year. He's an excellent 3-point shooter. Here's the optimistic take on him. The optimistic take is he comes in because of his stature and his role and the players around him. He ends up taking more threes than he's taken ever. Let's say he takes 9, 10 threes a game.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a lot. It wouldn't be unheard of in today's day and age. You'd say he takes 9 threes a game. Normally he takes 7. So let's say he takes 9 threes a game. And let's say he just has his best shooting season because he's an excellent shooter. So he usually shoots around 40%. Let's say he shoots 44 on 9 threes a game. And he's taking some more 2s, and now he's averaging career high 23, 24 points a game. That's completely on the table, I would say. I don't think that necessarily means he's a different player. I think it means he's in a different situation. But he's a good player. He's definitely a good player. And I liked the Nets doing that deal mostly for the asset as well. They were able to get that 2032 unprotected first round pick, and that could end up being a really good pick from Denver.
We'll see what Michael Porter Jr. is able to amount to in Brooklyn alongside this entire Brooklyn Nets roster. Fred Katz, thank you so much for joining us right here on the Brooklyn Boys Show. You got any final thoughts, basketball related, non-basketball related, that you want to share here right before we wrap things up on the program?
No, just that you're awesome, man. You are great. You do such a great job on this. I looked it up and watched some of your stuff before I came on, and I was like, damn, this guy's good. This is awesome. I just think it's so great that you're doing this, that you took the initiative to start it, and that you're so good at it. This was a great podcast appearance. You asked great questions.
Appreciate it.
You're to the point, you're knowledgeable, you do your homework. This is just an awesome job, man. Just fantastic. This was really fun. I'm so glad I came on.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And it's been great starting to do some of the NBA stuff. We've had this podcast for about a month now. So obviously I've done the Jets podcast, like we're talking about off air, for over a year and a half now. So I know my way around the NFL space. I know a bunch of reporters. It's been great getting to build, relationships in the NBA space. And Fred, thank you so much for the kind words. And I appreciate you sparing some time. Hopefully we could do this again around the trade deadline when the season heats back up and there's stuff to talk about, and it doesn't feel like we're just repeating ourselves on and on. But appreciate you all tuning in. Make sure you smash that like button and hit subscribe right here on the channel. It's completely free and it helps us grow significantly. He's Fred Katz of The Athletic. I'm your host, Connor Long, signing off right here on the Brooklyn Boys Show. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. And as always, go Nets.